Welcome to Pulling Back the Curtain. Thanks for joining us. Our guest today is Matt Santangelo. For those of you who may not have caught this podcast before, the idea, again, is to share all the stories with people in the community, clients, friends, people who have achieved success, pull back the curtain on how they've achieved that success, the things that they have and continue to need to overcome along their journeys to hopefully share information that other people can use on their own. So with that, thanks for coming and being willing to share. Obviously a lot to cover. An hour actually goes quick, 45 minutes to an hour. But for those who don't know you, Matt, maybe just give us a little bit of a background on where you grew up and how you found your way to Spokane. Kind of the Reader's Digest version. I born in North Portland, inner city North Portland, youngest of 9 children. 5 sisters, 3 brothers. I jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, say that my brothers taught me how to be physically tough. My sisters taught me how to be mentally and emotionally tough. The lessons I learned from my sisters are a lot more valuable than the lessons I learned from my brothers. But a great family, very humble, blue collar. Matter of fact, my parents still live in the same home that we grew up in 57 years now, in that same home in North Portland. Lots of love, but not a lot of stuff. My family were all relatively athletic, like game players is what I'd say, meaning like not necessarily sports, but if we're waiting for the bus, my dad would have us pitching pennies against the wall, or like everything was like kind of like a little game. And my family is inclined, meaning if we were going to go throw a frisbee or go hit a golf ball or go play ping pong, like not good, but we'd fit in. Like we could kind of coordinate enough to kind of get along in most games. Was your dad an athlete or your mom? Or? I think they both were. Although for their generation, my dad was who's the person who got to do it. Unfortunately, I always joke. My mom had been born in a different generation. She probably wouldn't have had any kids and been a working professional woman. And here she is, 9 kids later, and lots of action. And so I started playing ball when I was 3rd grade. I loved it from the start. I never remember a time where I didn't enjoy basketball. Played it all through, of course, grade school and high school. Had success, a lot of great coaches and a lot of good teams I got to be a part of. It eventually led me to Spokane here, where I played at Gonzaga. How'd you pick Gonzaga? Gonzaga was, one of my final 5 schools. So my final 5 schools were Oregon, Northwestern, Chicago, Rice, and Houston, Stanford, and Gonzaga. I wasn't smart enough to know what a Stanford degree would have done for me. Just joking. I wanted to play ball, so I wanted to put myself in a position. I felt like all 5 of those schools put me in a spot academically that was really solid. Obviously, Stanford, Northwestern, Rice are all big time. But Gonzaga and Oregon were good schools too. So I'm a Husky, so I'm not going to give the Ducks credit. I'll spot you 4 out of the 5. But I felt like academically I was in a good spot, and so really I was looking for the best basketball situation. And I've told this story before, but Coach Fitzgerald and Coach Few recruited me out of high school from Gonzaga. And Coach Fitz was in our living room with my parents. And he said, "Hey, no one's bigger than the program, no one. But if I had a basketball, I would give it to you and say, we're going to go where you're going to take us." So hook, line, and sinker, I'm all in, because no one's bigger than your family. No one's bigger than the neighborhood you grow up in, the community that we live in. No individual is bigger than any of that. However, he was giving me influence on the direction of that particular team, that network. And so I really, really appreciated that. Now, as an adult, I realized he probably told that to every kid of every living room he was in. But at the time, I was all in. Like, I love it. As it played out, everybody can continue to say that's on the straight up. So I came to Gonzaga. That part of the story is pretty well publicized. We had a really good team and had some great success that we still get to enjoy being a part of, with everything that meteoric rise for Gonzaga basketball. And then I went overseas and played. I played professionally for parts of 7 seasons: Italy, Spain, Greece, and Poland. And then moved back to Spokane. Famous last words: when I left Spokane, I wasn't coming back. When I left Gonzaga, and now I'd love it. This place is sticky. Yeah, it is. It's sticky. I don't know that I may have uttered it, but certainly probably thought it. And my family, I bet you're back. We'd talk about George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life, how he always had the grand plans, but always kept coming back to Bedford Falls. But how'd you know it was time to move on? Did teams just stop calling, or did you say, hey, it's time to go do something else? Or that's a great question. 7 years is a good run. Yeah, it's a good start. It's interesting because when I was younger, growing up, when I played well, I defined myself as a good person.
When I played poorly, I defined myself as a bad person. Like I was on a kind of an emotional roller coaster throughout my basketball career. For, it's just the way I was. So
all the way through,
yeah, until I was
very
done.
end. Really?
Well, that's the big reason why it ended. And so I don't know exactly why I didn't grow up with a pressure from my family, I played basketball because I loved to play it and I loved working on it. I loved working on the craft, and they call it the grind, but my favorite place to be is in a gym by myself or a driveway by myself, just kind of just playing, imagination, just trying to be as creative as you can. But for me, in order for me, at least what I thought at that time was I had to be really, I was kind of surly, like kind of a bad attitude and kind of wound tight.
That was what you felt you needed for that competitive edge.
Yeah, just to kind of to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. I lived my life that way. I remember I used to put up a lot of quotes on my mirror growing up. This is middle school. And I had one quote that said, someone somewhere is practicing.
That quote messed with me
and
bad.
When you meet them in head-to-head competition, they will beat you.
Yeah,
what in the world is a sixth grader doing with that on their window? Like, who lives with that kind of pressure that, right now, like you're brushing your teeth, getting ready to go to bed or whatever, and you're going like, someone somewhere's practicing, and when they meet you, they'll beat you. Like, who carries that around with them?
I distinctly remember hearing that quote at camps, and I swear to God, there's some part of me that's still ingrained in terms of that work ethic. And the truth is you could always, that's a great way to wind yourself to an early grave. Anyway.
Yep. No, I think it's the same. So I felt that way, and that
still
was
unpacking that one.
I carried that one around, and then it wasn't until about 28 years old, my son was born. Our oldest son was born. I was married. My wife, who I met at Gonzaga, never really bought into the basketball, life. She just didn't. She couldn't. She cared, but it just didn't drive her, the trappings of what that lifestyle was like. She loved Europe because we were in Europe.
Heck yeah. It's a pretty good way to
like
spend your 20s.
I had to leave the coffee shop to go to practice kind of thing,
Right.
She has a much more balanced and better perspective than I do.
Pull apart parts from the family, not trying to dig into relationship stuff, but when you talk about that edge and that, I'll use it for as relates to me, that almost that neuroses that quote can bring, and that being surly and having that edge. Did you find that was bleeding into other aspects of your life off the court?
Oh yeah, I think the social aspect
came to define your persona a bit.
Yeah, without question, because I don't think I took advantage of. I don't think I took advantage. I didn't take advantage of. Like friends, like social network. It just wasn't, but it wasn't all that important to me either. I don't look back with regret that I missed out on things. I just know that when people look back and the people that helped them along the way, how grateful they are towards those relationships. I don't necessarily have the same sentiment because I wasn't searching that out. I wasn't searching out that social feedback or that social stimulus. I was just doing my thing, just kind of.
You get into that means to an end thing. I was the same way. Yeah.
And so, like I said, not as balanced, but with my wife, and then my child, and this is where the kind of the light switch dimmed for me. She loved me no matter what. And it took me until I was 29 years old to realize that. And my 1-year-old son at the time, he needed his diaper changed no matter what. If I scored 20, scored 0, we won, we lost, I had a big contract, a small contract, like all that stuff was just noise. And I can almost remember to the moment where it's just like just gone. I was like, why am I so angry all the time? Like, why am I wound so tight? And just like that, my basketball playing days were done. Like, I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do the work that was necessary to play at the level that I wanted to play at and play at the standard which I had set for myself. And so I walked away. I walked away from jobs. I'm healthy. I was healthy at the time. Walked away from opportunities. I'll never make as much money as I did then, in my professional career. But that was what was right for me, and I don't look back with any. So
it's just an epiphany one day. This is not worth the trade-off.
Yeah, I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to be surly.
That's tough. It's true, and it is a balancing act, and I find those things. You have to be honest with yourself. Like, can I do both? We deal with it all the time. It's just everything about life can be a trade-off, right? And I'd like to be able to do both. Yeah. I want to be the happy basketball guy. It's like, can't be like that. Or people who in our line of work, like, I want to have all this stuff, but I also want to be able to retire now, and it's like, you don't get both, right? But those people who find contentment usually come to grips with those trade-offs. Any lessons learned from living abroad or fun stories? What was that like to be outside the States for 7 years?
So I remember my first year was in Greece. Half the first 4 months was in Greece, and we literally sat in dugouts so that people couldn't throw stuff at the back of our heads. Our coach smoked.
They're just that passionate about.
Oh yeah, I mean, you would catch a lighter right to the back of the, right to the back of the head. My coach smoked, and I remember coming out at halftime. We played in a little like cracker box gym, and you come out at halftime and you could barely see the rim at the other end because everyone took their smoke break at halftime. So you'd come out and be like, and so then you'd get through the game.
Trying to play.
You're going the locker room like, did I just spend all night at the bar? Like, what is going on? Like, you want me to run around in this stuff? And so, like, all along stops along the way. I mean, I remember from my first half of the year, I signed a 3-year guaranteed deal in Greece, and they paid me 1 month's salary and then didn't pay me again. And so I went to them at Christmas time. I said, listen, like, I'm not playing a lot. I wasn't playing a lot on the team. You haven't paid me in 4 months at that point. You still owe me 2.5 years going forward of contract. I said, I'll forgive the 2.5 years. Give me the money that you owe me and give me my rights, because I wanted to leave. Because my big thing, and that was a defining moment for me, because my big thing is like, I just wanted to play. Like, if I'm going to be that far away from the world, I've always just wanted to play. And if I'm good enough, I'm good enough. Like, right. But if I'm not, I'm not. Like, I'm okay with that. But damn, not trying. Like, damn, not getting a chance. Like, let me prove it. And so all I wanted was a chance to prove it. Like, again, if I'm good enough, smart enough, fast enough, jump high enough, whatever the metric is that we're measuring, like, I'm fine. I'm going to sleep the same at night knowing that, because I know I'm going to give everything I have. And that's really what, life for me, that was a defining moment. And so I had a chance to move to Italy. And so at Christmas time, my first year, I moved to Italy. And Italy, the team at the time was 1-11, and it's set up like football, like soccer, where if you're in last place at the end of the year, you get relegated to second division.
Gotcha.
And it's a lot harder to stay out of.
Since most of our people are probably American and who don't know soccer, European football, aka soccer, you get relegated if you're at the bottom. So they're facing relegation. And
just for the record, like, it's a lot harder to stay out of last place than it is to stay in first place. I've been on both sides of that equation, and when you're scrapping and fighting for your life, it is something else. And so one of the Americans on this particular team, his name was Bootsy Thornton, and we beat Bootsy. He played at St. John's, and we beat St. John's to go to the Sweet 16 my senior year. So when I'm looking at this team and kind of being recruited, I call Bootsy. I go, Bootsy, how's life there? And he's like, coach is good. He's like, we just need a point guard. Like, we're competitive, but we need a point guard to help manage the games. And I talked to coach. He's like, you're coming in, you're playing 35 minutes a night from day one. So I'm like, here's my chance. My agent is in my other ear saying, don't go to this team. I'm going like, why not? He's like, you just went to Greece. It wasn't a great experience. You go to Italy the second half of your first year and you get relegated. That's a bad year as a first year pro. Where does your career go? And this is where that moment was like, but I get to play. Like, just give me the ball. And so we go to Italy. The first game, this is the funny part of the story, and then I'll wrap it up. But the first game we play in Milan, which is like 30 miles away from Cantu, this little city in between Milan and Lake Como, so a beautiful part of the world. And so we go in with about 500 of our fans, and they're in the visitor section, but it's not roped off, it's SWAT team. Like, full shield, like SWAT team. I'm going like, what in the world am I got myself into? Well, we're getting crushed at halftime. We're like down 22 at half. So we come out of halftime and all the fans are gone. It's almost like a Western. You can see tumbleweed like going through the bleachers. Like, it's just like garbage and they're just out of here. So we'll
get beat up. We're willing to get beat up if you win, but we're not getting beat up.
We're not going to watch you get beat up.
And watch you get beat up, yeah.
And so we finish the game and we end up losing by 12 or 13. So we make it respectable on paper, but never back in the game. And we get on the bus and we drive back to our parking lot where all our cars are, our arena. And where are our fans? They're waiting for us in our parking lot, throwing rocks at the bus. And literally, I had shown up on
first game.
I showed up on Monday. The game was on Saturday. This is Saturday night. So I haven't even been there a week yet. And I go, Bootsy, like, I just talked to you last week and you said everything was good. Like, now we're scared to get off the bus.
He's like, but I also said we needed a point guard.
Yeah. And so they literally, the fans formed single file lines off the bus. And luckily they left me alone because I was the new guy. They left the Americans alone because usually they're a little bit bigger and stronger and broader. But they just got into the Europeans, just gave them everything they could in Italian.
That's hilarious.
But we ended up saving ourselves. We had the best record in the league second half of the season that year, and we're that particular team is in the record books in Can-2 basketball. Like literally the history of the basketball, that team is featured because we ended up saving ourselves, and they went on to have great success
Cool.
After that first year. So it was quite
you were only there that last half?
No, so I stayed there that entire half of the first year, and then I played in Poland for a season. That was 9/11. That was
wow.
I went to Poland. I was on a plane to Poland a month after 9/11. And then from Poland, I went from the Elite Eight at Gonzaga, Sweet 16, to this Can-2 team that had this wonderful success, to this Polish team that had never gone to the Final Four in European competition. And we went to the Final Four, got further than any other Polish team ever. So it was kind of like this crazy stepping stone of just basketball team accomplishments that I was a part of. And then I signed a 3-year deal in Spain, and I went to Spain, and then that was the middle part of my career, and then bounced back and forth to 2 different places in Italy. Ended up in Benetton Treviso, which is the closest thing to the NBA I ever played in, and ended with an Italian championship.
I know you're a pretty humble guy, competitive as you be. You've always struck me as very, in the conversations we've had, as authentic and willing to make yourself vulnerable. So I was excited to have you on today. I'm going to put you on the spot. So do you consider it just happenstance that you're winding up in places where they have these breakthroughs? I mean, it strikes me that that's not just a coincidence, that there's something that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Granted, nobody, especially in basketball, does it alone. And how do you even end up? I mean, it's one thing to have had the breakthroughs. It's another thing to keep ending up in spots where, Gonzaga had been successful, but in large part, I went to games as a kid.
Yeah.
They got in and they got their butts kicked in the first round, and then they went home.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And even if they were dominating, I remember watching Riley and all those guys back in the day. No disrespect intended in the slightest, but then you guys obviously turned the corner, right? And then you're mentioning these other things. What do you?
Yeah.
If there's something that you brought to the table, what was that thing, that edge that helped those places propel?
Well, I think I joke because in my the people I work with at Hoopfest, I had some of my jerseys framed that I had in a basement. And so I jokingly, I was like, do you think I could bring jerseys and hang them up? They're beautifully framed. This literally grade schools retired, high schools retired. Yeah. A college one, Gonzaga, the Italian championship one. Then I have a Team USA one that has a gold medal, all framed in the same. And they convinced me that it wouldn't be weird. I really struggle with that. Is that like putting up pictures of myself on the wall of my own office? It was just strange. Yeah. And it still is a little bit uncomfortable even when I look around. But when people come in and look, I go, look at all these jerseys. USA, Holy Redeemer Grade School, Central Catholic High School, Gonzaga, Benetton Treviso, Italy. The least successful jersey on the wall is Gonzaga. Every other jersey up there is a championship. Gonzaga we only went to the Elite Eight.
Sure.
We didn't even get to the quarterfinals. We didn't even get to the semis.
Sure.
So the least successful but for me to be able to say, I don't know who it was, but to say that I have a championship on every level I've played on, that means that carries a lot of weight for me, a lot of pride. Mm-hmm. What do I think of what my contribution was? On every team, I was a leader. Mm-hmm.
What was it? But in terms of that pivot point, you were changing cultures.
Yep.
You were a part of changing cultures. What, to the extent, is there a common thread that you could see of? And again, I'm not inciting any disrespect to any of the different things, let alone, of course, Gonzaga. I don't want to be run out of town, but. Obviously these places all had good histories, but there was something that you helped add. What was it that you saw when you arrived to when you left that changed? Is there anything that you've looked back on and said, that was a little bit different? Yeah,
and I think, Gonzaga, that we were able to get, a couple different, I was probably, they say, this is folklore, so don't quote me on this, but they say I was the highest recruit they ever had. Mm-hmm. Because of the 5 schools that I had. Mm-hmm. There's something about Gonzaga that I think is unique in the fact that there's a certain type of character quality that recruits themselves to Gonzaga. Yeah. There's when people say, what does it mean to be a Zag? Being a Zag means something. There's some type of character quality that seems to permeate that particular program. Right. And so all the guys had it. Sure. So for our group, and I think where my leadership is, kind of comes back to that. It's I'm a little bit leery of the term, but servant leadership, right? Yeah. Basically, my job was to make people around me better, And I played the position that would facilitate that most easily. I'm the point guard, right?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to if you can't dribble it up the floor, guess what? I can dribble it for you.
Yeah.
If you can't score, guess what? I can go score enough to help us. Like if you can't defend, I can defend enough to help out. So I think it was that, it was the approach of, I just really bought into making the people around me better. Mm-hmm. And then somehow that created that culture where now where you're not playing for yourself, you're playing for your teammates, you're playing for your brothers, you're playing for the family. And I think that kind of steam, that was a little bit of a change in culture. But then I had the physical tools to run fast enough, jump high enough, and then the work ethic that the skills were there. So that I could go do things that there was no, it's funny in youth sports, right? The beautiful thing about youth sports is that these poor kids get exposed for everything. If a kid can't dribble left-handed, you better believe there's a mom in the crowd going, force that kid left-handed, you can't dribble.
It's
and
almost
the poor
worse.
Kids out there just like cringing, going like, I know I can't dribble left-handed. Why is his mom yelling at me? But like for me,
She's
it was
got to
like,
put that on the gram later if she wants her kid winning by 20.
Yeah, but for me, it was like I would never want an excuse. Like if I heard someone tell me, even as a young person, I understood this. Like if there's a mom gonna yell, force him left-handed, it's like, yeah, force me left-handed, because you know what? I've worked on it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want. There's so many things in our world and lives that are out of our control. I wanted to be able to say that I could control what I could. So, because some days the shots don't go in, like they just don't. Mm-hmm. No matter how hard you work, Steph Curry misses them, right? Mm-hmm. The best shooters in the world miss 50% of their shots, right? As the quote goes. Mm-hmm. Those are out of your control, but your attitude, your effort, your work ethic, the things that you're doing when no one's watching, like those are in your control, and those are really important.
Did some of that, you think that that grit, I mean, with 9 kids, you come home crying because you can't dribble with your offhand and your parents just tell you, suck it up or don't dribble? Yeah. Like, was that, I mean, did you?
It would just, you never just did, like, it just never.
Or was it innate to you from the jump? It's just kind of in your DNA.
Really, really hard as a parent, because I think a lot of it was, we only have our own filter to look through things.
Right.
Which is great about this, because you're trying to connect people and say, hey, we're not that different. And I see my kids, like, they're doing it a lot differently than I did it.
Yeah.
And it's not because my dad or, it wasn't because anything. My parents said, it's just, I like to go out and work. Yeah. And I didn't want to be embarrassed and not be able to dribble left-handed. So I worked on it, or whatever the skill set was I was working on.
Sure. Well, you end up, time's already going quick. You end up at Hoopfest. No, this is awesome stuff. You end up, well, let me ask you, were there parts on these teams? I want to ask one more probative question if I can. So you talked about how you would take very personally, almost on a character type level, your successes and your failures, and struggled, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, then with some of the different emotions that I would presume would come along with that. I would think that could have negative impacts on one's ability. Did you just keep that all internal, or were there some things that stories maybe where it did leak out onto a teammate and you had to learn some new habits to again continue to be the best teammate you could be? Yeah,
so I think for me,
I guess where I'm driving there, wherever people are, I think sometimes you want something so bad, right? And a lot of people who, if they're listening to this podcast, think that, and you care so much. And sometimes you're surrounded by people who may not care on that same level or be perceived to, that when you have that, again, it can manifest itself negatively. And I know, speaking personally, that's the case. And then you think, okay, I've got to put up some emotional, mental safeguards to keep my drive from negatively impacting those around me.
Well, I think for me, it's really about, even back then, it was lead by example. Like, that's where I took some pride from, is like, I'm going to lead by example. So I wasn't telling you to do anything that I wasn't doing, and then if you didn't want to go on Friday night and work on your jumper, that was okay. I could shoulder that for you, because that wasn't what you needed to do, it was what I needed to do. So it never really lashed out in that way. I remember I flexed on one teammate, my best friend in college, where I actually kind of flexed some muscle and like tried to drop some ego. And that created a big divide. As a matter of fact, we just had our healing like this year, like literally this in the past 6 months. We kind of had we finally talked about it. 20 years later, literally 20 years later. And so that was really a wonderful thing. And I'd been carrying that around with me for a long time. And I think he was carrying it around with him more than I was aware of too. So, but that was only one time. Like, it only took one time to kind of say, that's not who I want to be.
That's not the way.
You know, the funny thing is, so when I first moved back, for a couple years, you don't want to play ball. Like, your relationship with the sport isn't healthy. And then eventually you come back to it. And I came back to it, and I would work out, play ball, noon ball at the Spokane Club. And I got to a point where I was like, listen, I would just tell people, instead of like, because I'm the type of guy that I would blow up and then call you and apologize. So I just said, screw it. Like, I'm going to go in, like, before we even start, say, fellas, inside these 4 lines, I get to be my pure self, and it may not be someone you like. I'm like, out there we can glad hand and smile and do all this.
Don't take it personal.
But here I get to be like.
Can you take it when people give it back?
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna take it personally, the thing.
Yep.
And then
we're
walk
gonna
out.
go. Like, who's gonna be the bigger, tougher, you know? And so that was for a couple years, but it was like a breakthrough for me to say, like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna be kind of an a-hole here for the next hour or so, and you know what? You gotta deal with it.
Gotta have a place where you can vent.
Yeah. So it's like, it's got to be a safe spot, and so that was really healthy for me. But yeah, I mean, it does manifest, and because you don't just knock the chip off your shoulder, like I still carry it around with me today.
It's hard to find those competitive outlets for sure. So some different career moves. You end up now you're the director of Hoopfest. That new role.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are, it's natural. He's a basketball guy. He's in charge of this, but it's I gotta imagine wildly different than playing basketball. So what are some of the lessons you learned there? Maybe we start off with like some of the, most of the people listening to this podcast know Hoopfest, I'm sure. Maybe there are a few who don't, but break it down. Biggest 3-on-3 tourney in the world, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How many people are playing this year? We're 2 weeks away.
We'll be over 6,000 teams, over 24,000 athletes will take the street next, a week and a half from now. It's about 3,000 volunteers, about 400 sponsors. It generates about a $50 million economic impact to this region. It's celebrating its 30th year.
I know.
This year. So it'll be my 6th event, my 5th year working there. In the 30th year of the event. There's nothing.
Did you ever play in it?
After I played in it once as executive director, the hot year, 2015.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, it was the hot year.
Yeah.
Played Open Elite, which was a total mistake, but and we lost in the Final Four. We lost in the Final Four in classic Hoopfest style, 20-19 on a long 2. So it was a good tournament. And so it's just a blast. I mean, it's for all levels. It's our most inclusive, our most diverse, and our most vibrant weekend that we have in our calendar year in this region, hands down. It's a great source of pride for the region, and that's kind of my job to be that, the steward of that, to make sure people know what their contribution is giving to this community.
Right.
What that return on investment is, depending on how you kind of slice or dice the words, but. And to be kind of a resource manager for those various areas to make sure they have what they need in order to execute the event, and then broader than that, trying to make the whole organization more comprehensive.
So let's get into that a little bit, because I know obviously grew up playing in the tournament as a kid. 10 Capital, obviously proud sponsor now. 3rd year, is that right?
3rd year. 10 Capital team check-in inside the Bennett block. Inside the Bennett block.
So we'll get this out before Hoopfest, right, Dane? We are now. But Hoopfest, everybody knows it for the tournament.
Yeah.
Unless maybe they're interacting. But I know for me, one of the draws, obviously, a lot of pride in giving back to the community, understanding what it means economically, sure. But I think just pride. I think Bloomsday, Hoopfest, so many of the different things. Spokane always out punches its weight class, right, when it comes to events, and to be part of that and give back is cool. But I think the real hook for me when we sat down a few years ago to talk about this is kids, right? That you guys are doing a lot to pour back into underserved parts of our community, all sorts of different kids activities, kids sports. Maybe help explain some of those different things that people maybe, even those who know the tournament and played in it for 25, 30 years may not know.
I think it's a great point, because I don't think a lot of people know it exists. I mean, the question I received when I first started is like, what do you do the rest of the year?
Yeah, they just think, Matt, they think you're sitting around 11 months of the year, right?
I get to go. And Hoopfest is large enough that you can't do it even for Hoopfest, but we run several other programs. We run Spokane AAU.
Yeah.
AAU is a national brand, but we have autonomy. AAU for us is just kind of an insurance mechanism for a youth basketball league.
Sure.
That just celebrated its 30th year. It's actually a little older, a season older than Hoopfest. That's about 1,500 to 2,000 families locally, and it has had men and women that have gone through that have played at the highest level of basketball, NBA and WNBA. But more importantly, it's brought basketball to tens of thousands of families here in our region. We run Ignite Basketball, which is an outreach program with School District 81, free to the kids. It's just 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It's a 6-week program. It's total engagement through the game. Like, it's literally giving these kids something to do on a Saturday night that instead of other stuff they could be doing on a Saturday night. Our primary beneficiary is Special Olympics. So when Hoopfest was founded in 1990, two founders had the idea. One had played in a 3-on-3 in DC and wanted to come back and bring one to Spokane, but wanted it to be in a downtown core. Didn't want to be relegated to fairgrounds or arena parking lot, even though I know we use all the parking lots now.
Yeah.
And the other one just wanted to have tied to an event that would be able to benefit Special Olympics. So we're actually the largest benefactor to Special Olympics, the state of Washington, in Eastern Washington. So Central and Eastern Washington,
cool.
Hoopfest is the largest benefactor for that. And then we do our community courts. So we have 30 plus regional basketball courts and parks. So anytime you drive by a park and you see a Hoopfest backboard, that's something that Hoopfest built and maintains through the proceeds of our organization.
Very neat.
And then the last piece of that is we have a grants program. So we have, we'll receive grant requests from, basketball. The one I always think about off the top of my head is the senior games. We support a team of 70 plus and 60 plus that travel around to regionals and nationals for the senior games.
Cool.
But the community centers, our schools, things like that, will request funding for basket or basketballs or whatever their basketball related kind of dream wish or wish list is. And then when we can, we support that as well. So Hoopfest directly has given away about $2 million over the 30 years. They've built the 30 plus community courts and the economic impact, the more implied benefits of a large event like that.
Very neat. One of the things I've been asking here lately, I alluded to it a few times, is the dichotomy between being a leader and being a manager. I, prior to starting the firm, incorrectly kind of assumed they were the same thing. Yeah. As I define to help you, and by all means define how you think about it, but I'm pretty good at the vision part, pretty good at the inspiration part most of the time. Yep. Not always great at helping lay out all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps for one of the colleagues. Yep. For a lot of reasons. One, maybe I'm just on to the next vision. Sometimes it's something that just is innate to me that I don't think needs to be explained. But I know over the 8 years of 10 Capital, something I've had to work on getting better at, but then also surrounding myself. This question came up from a guest a couple of weeks ago. Are you just changing it, or are you hiring people? I mean, as we've been able, we've tried to get people who had their gifts and those things. Do you find yourself being more of one than the other?
Well, no, just really, really similar to what you said. Exactly what you said. I really struggle with the detail work of bringing the vision to life. Yeah. I speak from my heart. I think that there's a certain amount of enthusiasm for what we do that's contagious. I think that's really important. One of the things that I've learned is that I'm trying to really focus on trying to do the things that only I can do. Yeah. Like if there are things that someone else can do, like let them do it. Because we all have different things and things that I may feel are not the most effective use of my time may really be fulfilling for someone else. And there's no right or wrong. It's just, recognizing where my strengths and more importantly, where my weaknesses are. And really trying to be complementary and or find complementary skill sets. And then I think for me, like it's almost more resource manager than leader, at least in the Hoopfest world, because there's got to be the vision and strategy, and for us, everyone, you don't have to convince anyone at Hoopfest to work hard. I mean, you show up 10 days from now and you see the heavy lifting that volunteers are doing, and you're going like, I just hope I'm representing you well. Like, you all are doing the work. Like, this is amazing. And it's really, really humbling in that sense, because we are, I joke, but it's true, we're the hardest working team in basketball. Because picking up garbage for 250,000 people is not easy, right? Being a court monitor out there on Saturday and Sunday on a youth court with parents yelling at you, like, all those things are not easy, but we have people that do that because they know that the impact that they're making. And so for me, it's like, just please view me as a good steward of all the work that you're doing. Please, please, please. So there's a lot of gratitude there, and a lot of, hope that, my inspiration, my vision, how we're trying to make it, more valuable, how we're trying to make it better, how I interact with the city and all the interested stakeholders, are not just hanging on, but like, we're trying to grow this thing. And, we're trying to make sure that that return to those volunteers, the return to the community, gets better and better every year.
Yeah. What, going back to that leader manager dynamic, obviously you talk about it as a steward, which is a great related aspect as well. What, I guess there's two questions that jump out, so hopefully I can remember to get both to them. Pick whichever one you want to attack first. Which aspects of the managerial side have you said, no, this is something I need to get better at, I can't just delegate?
Yeah.
And then secondly, to the extent you delegate something and the ball gets dropped, how have you learned to approach that constructively?
Yeah. So I think with the managerial side, for example, when I first showed up, all of our books, just QuickBooks, we're a small business. It's public. We're about a $2.5 million budget is what the event costs about 2.6 to pull off. No, not quite that much, but it feels like that much. And that's for all the programs. So all the books were done internally. Well, I'm not an accountant, and nor do I aspire to be one. So that one was really easy, like just finding the resource. Like, we need to find a bookkeeper, and it doesn't need to be a full-time spot for us, but it needs to be someone that comes in, understands the technology and ins and outs of QuickBooks so they can do their work efficiently, but then help me, because I kind of joke, like, I don't need to know how the watch works. I just need to know how to tell time.
Right.
Like, I'm smart enough to know, like, if there's money in and money out. I'm not smart enough to know,
right.
Or at least I don't apply myself in that way. I downplay my intelligence, but and so that would be one of, like, a technical, like, improvement. Like, we brought in someone who has a skill set, who's willing to help, and that we can afford. And then I become back to that resource manager. Can we afford them, and how do they fit in the budget? So that'd be one example of us getting better. The delegation of a task that doesn't get done, I think, has been a really hard one, because especially this time of year, there's so many tasks. Right? There's just so many tasks.
Is how do you coach them?
Yeah.
So you tell, hey, Tim, I need you to do this. And for whatever reason, and maybe I'm sure the reason depends, if I just blow it off compared to I try and just fail, but I gave the effort, how do you approach that in a constructive fashion to help your team improve?
Yep. So I try to really take away the excuses. So in that sense, like, one of the things we really struggled with when I first started was our office space, our physical office space. It was in the Skywalk, just across the Skywalk from you, in the Bank of America building. And it was kind of this long space. It had two doors coming. It was a retail space. And we were right across the street from STA Plaza. So we had everyone stop by our office at least 2 times a day on the way to lunch, because what are they doing at Hoopfest? Of course they want to talk. Right. And then they would come straight to my office. I'd literally be working on people's compensation. They'd come back, hey, how's the Gonzaga game? And I'm going like I'm working. Like, you can't do that. And so, like, I joke with the woman who works at the front desk. Her name's Kelly. I was like, Kelly, do we have to talk to all these people? Like, is this part of our community outreach that I need to, engage with all these people?
How to say no. That's going to be my next question.
And so, but the idea was like, okay, we need to fix that. So I want to take away all the excuses. Because right now, if I delegate something to you and you drop the ball because we have 15 people coming in our office and we don't know how to close the door, that to me, I was like, I want to take away the excuse.
Sure.
So we moved offices, right? So now we have doors, and we still have a very welcoming office. You can still come by and visit us. It's all good. But
we're happy to give you a scouting report for every Gonzaga.
Yeah. But now we have doors. Well, then it was computers. We couldn't afford technology. We were doing hand-me-down computers from Moss Adams that were already old by the time we got them, and we were trying to repurpose them. And then we did IT in the office. So, like, hey, the printer's down. Hey, man, can you go MacGyver that thing up, And so we got rid of that. We found a third-party IT company that felt sorry for us, say, come in and help us do this. Apply your expertise. But what that allowed us to do is elevate everyone's job. So all those excuses that kept them from doing tasks were now no longer excuses because they weren't there. So now it becomes a point where now we're to a point where if you're not doing the job, I got to up my coaching game. But up until this point, it was just really simple, fundamental things to really make us much more efficient and effective. So we haven't got to that next level like, hey, nothing's broken. There's no one coming to bug us. You can close the door if you need to. Now you're not doing your job. That becomes a problem.
Right.
We haven't got there. And that's where I mean where like we all make mistakes. And I think the other thing too is like I make a ton of mistakes. So how am I going to hold you accountable for something that I can't hold myself accountable for?
Right.
I don't think that's fair from probably more from a leadership perspective than a management perspective. So
Sure.
I think managers are probably pretty good about holding people more accountable
Yeah.
for.
Well, it's hard to play both good cop and bad cop,
Yeah.
be the vision guy and be the thing. Not that a buzzer sounds, but how's our time?
We're like 40 minutes.
We're at 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Great. We'll keep going. Whether this is Hoopfest, something else, a new sport you picked up, a new hobby, parenthood, talk to me about a new endeavor and you realize, so you went a good part of your life and you got pretty good at basketball probably longer back than you can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're just good at this thing that defines you for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's done. And so now it could be whatever. You can pick. This is open. How have you learned to take up something new? Because you went from Matt, the great basketball player, to Matt, not so good at fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Could be professional, could be personal, could be a sport. I know for me it was a struggle. We were talking about golf before we got on.
I was just going to go there. Yep.
I was not as good of a football player as you were as a basketball player, but I was okay. And then all of a sudden I go back, and I was pretty good at school, and so then you go back and learning and doing new things where you have to sit there and go, I'm not good at this, right? Or I'm not as good as the people I need to go be doing things with, whether it was in important things, business-related stuff, to golf. It can be a mental trip, right? Because I don't remember what it was like to be bad at a lot, right? I learned a lot of that stuff. So how have you, again, you can use anecdotal examples if you want, but how have you approached having to learn new things and recognize you don't have the skills you had on the court with respect to this thing?
Well, golf was going to be my example. And I know, you and I did talk about it off of, or before we sat down. So I was introduced to golf after basketball. So I was 30 years old working in this particular industry in financial services. And I got introduced to golf through client golf.
Right.
And I was, like you just described, maybe more competitive than some, not as competitive as others, but certainly proud.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm used to doing things.
Yeah, you don't want to go out there and
standard.
just be embarrassing.
Right. But I was embarrassed. I was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And you couldn't, you were with clients. So you didn't have the luxury to be mad.
You didn't get to do your inside the four lines, act like an a-hole.
Not out there, right?
Yeah.
And so, which made it harder when I went and played basketball because I really I took it all out on them.
Took it out.
But that one was at the same time as frustrating and humbling as it was also really liberating, because then I realized I can enjoy things and not have to have just success. Like there's no measure of success in my golf game, but I could still really enjoy it. And so then it became really what's the most important. The most important is, no one cares more about your golf game than you do, right? That's what they say. Everyone, you go into any clubhouse and everyone's talking about the one shot they hit. They could care less what shot you hit or what shot the other guy hit. They only care about their own shot. And so for me, it's like, the connection that was made within those relationships and learning to carry a conversation. So maybe instead of like practicing my golf, I was practicing other skill sets, and golf was just the gathering place.
Sure.
And so I think I got a lot out of the experience, and I still enjoy golf, and I'm still not very good at it. And so I think that helped me dumb down the ego and all the other things. The only area that the ego still exists, and it's really hard, is of course with my kids. Like we still walk into a gym and the blood boils. Like it's there. I know what it's supposed to feel like. I know what it's supposed to look like. I know how it's supposed to play. And that doesn't always happen, and that's hard. That's that's one that I've had to be talked off the ledge there from my wife for many times. And now I feel like I have a decent balance with my kids. But at first, my oldest is 14 and almost on his way to high school. But at first it was hard, and it was my ego. It was all mine. It was nothing he was doing or she was doing or anyone. It was just
How
my
was
ego.
that So, and you've alluded to a couple times, unsung hero. She's been in your story, patiently waiting for you to figure some stuff out. If I can paraphrase, I think I could get her to buy onto that. How, when she's come to you, whether, and again, we may even go back, you say, hey, I think I've had this realization about myself. Wife met her, obviously, very pleasant, I'm sure astute. So you come to her in Europe, and we'll get maybe to the kid thing you just alluded to, and you say, hey, I think I just had this epiphany about myself. And again, I'm guessing and paraphrasing, you can tell me if I'm wrong. She goes, yeah, no, I know. I've known that for a while. Or in the case of the kid, where maybe she comes and talks to you, that's hard to hear sometimes someone say, like, yeah, either I already knew you weren't doing that great, or you need to approach this differently. Talk to me about taking constructive criticism.
Yeah, I think the constructive criticism, so for Kathy, for my wife, she has always been so consistent. Yeah. So it's not like she was, you need to think about it this way, like you need to do this, you need to do A, B, C,
no
D.
pressuring, just,
it's like, this is just, just her actions speak a lot louder than her words. Mm-hmm. And so consistent throughout many, many years. So I think that part was kind of just like, it was like a slow melt. Like it was like, wait a second, you're still here. 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 She wasn't telling me, hey, I'm here again. No, it was just consistent. And so that's probably why it, took me so long to realize some of these lessons. And so I think with that, she just has been, and then with the kids, it's been a little bit more explicit. Like, you can't talk to them like that. Yeah. Or, her big thing, which I tease her now, is like age appropriate. They're 5, they're 6,
that's
whatever
hard.
It is.
Yeah, to go back and keep
And so she just always had great perspective on that. And at the same time, as foreign as her approach is to me, like mine is as foreign to her, because she's not wired as that competitive. She has no ego tied to it. She's Kathy no matter what happens. My ego is all over the place depending on who's watching, and that kind of thing. And so that's been a little bit of a, just hard to understand the other person's perspective because they're just looking at it from a completely different angle.
How do you overcome doubt?
Hard work. I just think I was thinking about that with my second son, my 11-year-old. Like, where does confidence come from? Like, how do you get someone to play more aggressive or be confident?
We've had people tell you, at whatever it is in life, you aren't currently good enough.
Yeah.
So for you was, then I'll go grind.
Well, yeah, I'll go hard work. It goes back to like what I talked about on my skills. Like, you have to control what you can control. If you're controlling all the variables you're controlling through work ethic or your smarts or, your habits, and things still not going the right way, you're doing everything you can. And only you know that. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no one that can tell you, hey, like, when you lay your head on the pillow at night and those little voices start kicking in about what your day looked like, if you gave it everything you had or if you cut corners. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what anyone else says, it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's like when that self-doubt creeps in, it's not so much like nose down and work. It's just like, am I controlling what I can control? And I think, one of the other things that I've learned here in the last couple of years, like, you can't sprint at everything. So when the doubt creeps in, it's like, hey, how do I find, what problem are we trying to solve? And how do we then engage people? And I have no problem saying, Tim, I need your help. I have no problem, hey, I need your help here. And part of that's humility. And I think a lot of that is that vulnerability that I think is a great example of strength that seems to be a hot topic, maybe just with our age, of like what it really means to be like, hey, I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know.
We mentioned that quote around the ghost that's always out there practicing. I literally think about that one all the time. It's funny you should bring that up. I think I know for myself, a number of things. Number one, you realize you were never as good as you thought you were. But beyond that, when you're, let's just say, pre-wife / kid / partners, it's, team-based or not, you and I both played in team sports. you don't have a lot going on. You think you're busy, but you're not, and you're young, and you have more energy. And I guess the earlier point is less things pulling on your time, and so you can just to some degree sprint
into everything. Yep.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, your wife needs you to like pay attention, and your kids need that, and your colleagues need this, and you're gonna burn out and or burn up relationships, and finding that balance of, and not just being busy to be busy. I think that for me, that's a lot of time where. You know, you're out on the proverbial court practicing for this ghost, but it's like, is this really where you should be? Is this really effective? Would the best thing to be take a rest and come back when you're more refreshed, or would your time better be spent shoring up this other relationship or thing that you need to do? And that's, I mean, I don't know that anybody ever nails that, but that's, I think to your point, being more conscious of, and we deal with people in planning all the time. I mean, they think whether they're looking at how much risk they think they want to take or what they want to accomplish. And there's just the idea I've been fascinated with for a number of years now, given a lot of the recent studies and books that have come out, is just how much of our subconscious is controlling our day-to-days. And the books that have been written and Nobel Prize have been won like 90+%. Yeah. It's a frightening amount. So really unpacking, like, what do you really want to do? What do I have to be doing?
Yeah.
What does fill me up? What do I value more, this or this? And trying as best I can to pull as much up into my consciousness, so that, again, if I fall short, if I have to make that trade-off and give up something that I think I do like, that it's more times than not for the more important thing. Again, work in progress. But
no, it's really interesting. And I think like for, and I go back to my basketball days and what some of the things that shape me now is like, I've already retired from one career. And I think, in a lot of ways, I live my life in reverse, because from a very young age, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I shaped my life accordingly. And I had some degree of success, or at least experience of that. I played it till I was 29, so I played it to basically adulthood, at least young adulthood. And so I'm not chasing anything anymore.
Are you really not? I was going to ask you, like, what is that really?
Yeah.
To suddenly, like, is there some part of you, as hard as I know you do, because you said it offline when there were no mics and cameras, that pulls and cheers and bleeds for Gonzaga? Is there some part of you, I mean, the old Toby Keith song, I'm not as good as I want to, that is hard to let go of that competitive flame, or have you put that down?
I don't think it has. I think, like, even this year when Josh Perkins broke my assist record.
Sure.
That one was really interesting to me because, like, people will come up and apologize. Hey, man, sorry your record got broken. I'm like, sorry for what?
Yeah.
Like, that's more a reflection on your own insecurity than mine. Like, I'm supposed to be sorry because someone had a wonderful career at Gonzaga.
Yeah.
And then you look on top of that, and I'm supposed to go like, and it's not like he's playing on a sub 500 team that's struggling. Like, they're the number one team in the country, and the kid is dominating. He's playing with NBA talent. Like,
yeah.
And I could joke like, yeah, great. I almost had to make a basket for my teammates in order to get an assist. He gets to like 4 passes removed, he still gets credit for it. I was breaking Stockton's record. They didn't want to see that fall. He's just breaking Santangelo's record. So you can kind of joke tongue in cheek that stuff, but there's no.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't sleep any different.
You've put that career down.
I didn't sleep any different. And, frankly, it's 20 years later, and I'm still recognized and associated with the success they become. Mm-hmm. So, ironically, the great irony is my ego's fed more than if I was this angry, bitter man that was still held on to it.
To your point, Stockton gets his, but there's a lot of great players. Jeff Brown, really. Yeah. There are a lot of guys who played some serious hoops. And the other thing I think that's changed a little. You got to play pro. I mean, I think back even talking about Hoopfest and AAU and all, NBC camp, Shan Furch, and watching him ball out. It'd be interesting to watch a man with his talents be playing now. I think that was at a time where a lot of people overlooked the 6'1", 6'2" white guy who could jump and shoot.
Yeah, totally.
And maybe a different story, because unless my memory's done, that dude could ball.
Yeah, he'll be playing at Hoopfest. He's signed up again.
Yeah. Anyway, no, that's interesting because it is different. I mean, I think about to be defined by something like that and then have to move on. So, sorry, I don't know if I cut you off.
No, but I think that at this point gives me unique perspective in the fact that I'm not. Yeah, I want Hoopfest to be successful. Yeah, personally, I want to be successful. But it's not tied to my identity anymore. It actually frees you up to be more effective.
It's going to be one of my last questions, was too natural of a lead in. So where do you sit today in any aspect of your life? How do you define success? When you talk about going home and putting your head on the pillow and feeling like I gave everything today that I could, what is success at this point? There are no more no more literal championships to be won, right?
It's not counted by points anymore.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of sports, that you know if you won or lost, right? Like that, and trading investments, real time, like what that
getting
is.
judged daily,
unless you're a sophisticated investor, and then you have a leg.
You understand the bigger purpose.
Performance.
Correct.
Disclaimer at the bottom of the screen.
Exactly. Thank you, Matt.
Past performance. No, I think what does success look like for me? I think, I don't know. That's a hard one. I know you'd mentioned it before we sat down on camera, so even in the back of my brain, it's been rattling around for an articulate answer, but I don't think I have one. I think, obviously I want the business of Hoopfest to grow.
Yeah.
I want, continue to make strides in how we, deliver basketball to our community. I think it's really important, because I think not the value of necessarily this game of basketball, but what you learn from the game of basketball is really valuable. So more kids should have a chance to play it. I think that's a measurable thing, number of kids participating. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get stuck in the number of teams at Hoopfest, because we're larger than life, and maybe we'll be over 6,000 teams this year, potentially larger than we were last year, which is unheard of in events, especially in events this large. But ones are for 5,000 teams next year. We're still the largest in its kind in the planet Earth. Like, it's still massive and this wonderful event. So it's not, just picking numbers isn't, I don't think, a fair metric to determine what's successful for that weekend. But I want, more people to I guess get to play basketball at all ages, make it more accessible. Would be one way to measure it, but I don't have a good answer for that.
How do you balance the things you want for Hoopfest in your career? And I know offline, and I'm not asking you to here in any way you don't want to, or even to push or cajole, but you've been very honest. I've been very appreciative with me about wanting to be a great husband, wanting to get better at that, your kids and what you brought up in terms of balancing, as relates to at least the basketball component, your ego and that struggle. How do you, again, I'm just always fascinated, if only to glean some insights to help myself with wanting to give your all during the day, and yet being a husband and a father. I'm only 3 years in, with my oldest being 3. I don't want to come home drained either, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to get the leftovers. How do you balance that out in terms of the day job and what I know, because again, you brought up offline, is what's most important to you and your family? Yeah.
Well, I think so. For 6 of 8 years, 7 of 9 years, I did the radio for Gonzaga basketball. I actually got to call the national championship game and the run. 2 years ago, I stopped doing that. Can't sprint at everything. So from those 2 years, I spent more time in the gym than I ever did on the radio, because now I'm coaching my kids. So I guess one thing that I'm very fortunate for is my profession. Like, I literally left my wife and my 7-year-old daughter at the office to come over here, because my wife is the volunteer coordinator for Hoopfest as a volunteer position, and my daughter Stella is so excited because she's going to be a brand ambassador this year. We've made up a job for her.
Cool.
So part of that piece is very family friendly.
Yeah.
I'm coaching my boys. Like, I'll coach my daughter if she wants me to coach her. Like, they're in the gym with me. We have 2 summer league games tonight. We'll be in the gym all night long. The hard part is where I'm personally getting my juice from.
Yeah.
Because those things don't charge me up.
Yeah.
So I'm sprinting at all these things, but I'm not really the self-care, the fame, the very popular cliche.
Health and where you get your energy is one way. So by all means.
So like M&Ms and coffee, I guess. I don't know exactly how to do it.
That's not good health advice, Matt. I don't know a lot about it, but I know.
Yeah. Practical though. Practical health advice.
And so some sugar and caffeine.
Yeah. So that is my challenge now at this phase in our life, is where do I fill up?
When do you get to be selfish?
More.
Yeah.
Yep. And that doesn't happen. This time of year it doesn't happen, especially, but this is our season. So that makes sense. That's hard.
You have any ideas on the horizon?
I think for me, like the nutrition and working out is an important piece for me, like getting that time. I realized through some self-assessment work that I don't get I'm a little more introvert than extrovert. I think people find that hard to believe. But the social interaction wears me out. I almost, it's almost like Vegas or an airport. I don't mind being around people as long as I can watch them and don't necessarily have to engage. Like learning that little balance in act is interesting. It doesn't always work when you have to walk into the warehouse for a summer league game, where you kind of just hide. There's no a lot of hiding around basketball in this community for me. But so learning those things I think are big. And I think this is probably, I don't know if you'll cut this out, but like the money thing, like we don't, we earn a good wage, but we don't have, like, we're not going on big trips. I can't say like, gosh, I really like to travel. Who doesn't like to travel? I ain't got no money for that. Like, that's just stressful to me.
Right.
So it's really trying to find those daily habits that give you a little bit of a reprieve, every day versus the burn out and then go to Hawaii or, burn out and do whatever, like I try to find piece by piece every day. So I'm enjoying the journey a little more than the destination.
I think finding little pieces of each day has become more critical for me than, I didn't take a vacation forever because I was broke mostly. And then, about the time Kerr started coming back, practice law, came back, did this, starting from scratch, didn't have a network. My family's not in this business. Nobody told me that was something that should happen.
Helps.
Yeah, so just didn't know when to quit. And then, of course, you get the, family, and we've let's spend time with them. But pulling those pieces out, like you, introverted, I think a lot of people think that means shy, and I was never shy. I didn't mind playing quarterback and running for president or putting myself out there for different things. And I love people, and I love being around people. I think that's another miss, whether it's shy or like, oh, that means you don't like people. No, I love people. Yeah. But it just it pulls out.
Yeah, it's where the energy.
And I choose to think because we care more, Matt. We're pouring more out. But no, it's finding that alone time, and that's hard. That is hard to do. If you figure it out, let me know, because the wife and kids want to see you and be like, no, daddy's gonna go lock himself in a room. That's not really an option, although my wife would tell you that's how she feels about me on the Peloton. That's enough shout out. I'm trying to get a sponsorship here. They don't need my help and they get it for free already. But no, just something where I can just be in my own head for 45 minutes.
But golf can do that.
Golf does not do that for me, Matt.
But I found, like the friendships where I can be myself, more the surly, bad attitude is really valuable.
Just authentic,
not
having people looking for a way to read the worst into what you said or did is huge. Yeah. I have a handful of people where, and again, it's not like there's some huge alter ego, but just not be
so measured and
just so measured,
considered.
Can be big. What's one of the last questions I have for you? What is the thing you're looking forward to most right now? What in life has got you excited?
So we've taken on a new venture at Hoopfest, so all basketball related. Same.
This is an exclusive. Is
same
this our first
sandbox.
Exclusive?
Yeah.
Sweet.
A couple years ago, when Visit Spokane did their branding exercise where they wanted to rebrand the city, they came to Hoopfest as like an interested, stakeholder in the community and community partner. And they said, "What do you think we should be?" And so I'm from Portland, and Portland has a great kind of motto that says, "Keep Portland weird." Right? That's who they are. That's what they are. They're not trying to say, "Hey, keep Portland eccentric and sophisticated." They're like, "No, we're weird. Let's just own it and move on." And I love it. So I was like, what are things about Spokane that are uniquely our own? And of course, I'm biased, but I said, we are a basketball town. Like, we care an inordinate amount towards one sport per capita. And it doesn't matter necessarily.
With an honorable mention to what Bloomsday is, because I think it's the largest road race. And if you look at Gonzaga and Hoopfest, it's.
And so then we said, okay. So we said, and that then you make a great point. So then, okay, if we're just a college town, do we really care more? And like Lawrence, Kansas probably cares a lot. There's a couple cities in North Carolina that can make that argument. Yeah. So then you go, okay, so we're obviously not a pro. We're not a pro team. But if we were just a college town, I don't know if we could make the claim that we are, a basketball town. I was like, well, what about high school? Well, high school this last year, we had 6 teams play in state championships from Eastern Washington. 2 years ago, we had CV girls were national championships. Gonzaga back-to-back state championships. And evidence for many years, Ferris had a great run. I think it was Central Valley girls.
Oh, they dominated
for a long time. Yeah,
they dominated. Even back into when I was in high school in the 90s, CV girls basketball was frighteningly
awesome.
good.
And so then you're going like, okay, so high school. But if you were high school basketball, Indiana probably has the claim. That's Indiana by reputation has always been high school basketball. So you go youth basketball, okay? So youth basketball, you go to any big city, you're going to have more kids. But Spokane AAU is one of the largest clubs in the country and has been for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm talking per capita. But the one thing that puts us over the top that no one can compete with is Hoopfest.
Sure.
It's for everyone, and the whole city shuts down. And so what we determined was, fast forward a couple years, is that we are in fact Hooptown USA. So we're launching the brand, a community-wide brand that Hoopfest will be the steward of saying we are Hooptown USA. And ironically,
live Monday.
No one owned it. I was in Eric Sprunk's office, the COO for Nike, 2 weeks ago, doing just because he likes me.
So you were trademarking
We
that.
trademarked it. And I said, I kind of gave him this elevator pitch to him in his office, and he was like, Hooptown USA. And he looked at us, he's like, we didn't own that? And I'm like, he's like, why are we paying the people
You
we're
told
paying?
him after you had
I was like,
trademark,
oh, yeah. We own it.
You had the number.
Yeah, I'll make you a deal.
Now, that being said, if you'd like to buy Spokane, Phil Knight. Yeah.
And so we're going to launch this brand, and we're going to do it and it's been a kind of a fast forward. Phase 1 will be a brand launch, and then the second phase will be a capital campaign, which we've never done before. Hoopfest has never. We're a nonprofit, but we've never done a capital campaign. But we were approached to build a basketball court in Riverfront Park in the redevelopment, outdoor basketball court. And so we're going to build, and we said we want to own the project. We're going to build an outdoor basketball court, a Spokane Basketball Hooptown Hall of Fame. We want to then do an enhancement project for our community courts that we already own. And then we're going to do citywide branding for Hooptown so that we can have assets in place. So let's say when North Carolina comes to play Gonzaga, we can kind of flip the switch, like boom, we're Hooptown. State B comes to town, we can boom, we're Hooptown, and kind of have the banners and the signage and kind of the assets that we can kind of say, like, this is who we are. And so we're launching this brand next week to kind of see what it's like. If people buy into it, I think they'll have at least strike a chord with most. It has to the people we've kind of presented it to at this point, as we're trying to kind of gather the wagons and get people to buy in. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, it's the same thing. It's like once they start to hear the different reasons why they go, it totally makes sense. It just hasn't been articulated before.
My grandma's 91. It's no joke, Matt. And loves Gonzaga basketball so much that I forget the game that it would have been, but she got so worked up when Gonzaga lost the game that she got so sick she couldn't come to my wedding.
Yeah.
That's a true story. And she's not, again, 91, there was no women's basketball back in the day, but no, it is a town that inordinately per capita, start to finish, people who have played, never played, loves basketball. So that's exciting.
It is. So that's been a fun project because obviously it's a audacious enough goal to kind of get the business mind working a little bit, the creative mind, because we're saying it's not just we want to brand the city, like we want people to buy into it. So I think that's been fun. It's been fun to get the affirming. The 91-year grandma is a great example. I speak to a number of different retirement communities. It's all they care about. Mm-hmm. But like I said, if we were just that, and we wouldn't qualify as Hooptown. If we were just a college town, we're not. We have all these other little things that add up to this this identity that hopefully that will resonate with the community. We'll be able to spearhead, but then we'll also open up some opportunities for further development and accessibility.
Is there going to be some things at Hoopfest around Hooptown?
There is, yes. So we're going to, Monday, that's why Monday's the big day, but we had a local author, Chris Crutcher's his name, a juvenile fiction author, write a love letter from the city of Spokane to the sport of basketball and the sport of basketball to the city of Spokane, decreeing, kind of making the claim that we're Hooptown. We'll do a billboard, and then because we have nothing else going, we bought a bus. So we wanted to do like a pop-up retail. And so we were talking about camper.
You have some apparel?
Yep. We'll have a camper or something like that. And then someone suggested we need something that's a little more basketball than a camper. And I was like, what about a school bus?
There's a vehicle that's
What about a school bus?
Sure.
I'm like, what?
That's how we all got to our first games, right?
99% of athletes know the experience.
Nice green pleather seats.
We took them out.
Oh,
but it was a school bus.
All right, it was a real school
and
bus.
So that'll make its appearance next Thursday. So Monday will be a billboard campaign and the love letters, kind of a teaser. It'll live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday we'll have the bus. We'll be introduced. We'll do some form of a stunt. Maybe go down to the games, crash at City Hall.
Does Hooptown have an Instagram handle yet?
It will. I think it does actually, but nothing's on it. It's not live yet until next week.
All right. We'll look that up and connect.
It's live today.
So anyways, that's been fun because it's been a whole new project. And that's the beauty of Hoopfest too. Is like it's very entrepreneurial still. Like you just get to go create, and frankly, you're pressured to create. It's your responsibility to do something new, each and every year, and keep it fresh and moving. And so that part's fun.
Well, it's exciting. I'm glad we'll get this out in time, and great steward to be now the ambassador of
Hooptown USA.
Hooptown USA. Thank you so much for joining us. So I know people can find you at Spokane Hoopfest.
Correct.
We'll make sure the link's there, but there'll be a Hooptown handle that people can find this stuff.
Hooptown USA.
At Hooptown USA.
We're officially the first follower.
There you go. I'm not even following it. And then at M Santangelo 13 if you want to go the personal, if you want to see Stella, the brand ambassador.
There you go. People do. They love that stuff.
So, there's lots of social media. Rules the world.
It is. Yeah. It is. So it's for better and for worse. So, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas.